This is Draenor, ancient homeworld of the Orcs, a paradise of unbridled nature and proud shamanistic tradition. But this isn't where you are. You're here, in Durotar. And why are you here? Well, because your ancestors got tricked into drinking demon blood, went on an interplanetary bender, won some wars, lost some wars, blew up Draenor, got stuck in some internment camps, and then were rescued by this guy, Thrall, who led the Orcs to this stinking sun-baked litterbox of a desert. This is you, a new orc, freshly spawned from the dirt or something, and you begin your journey here in the Valley of Trials, armed only with an old axe and wearing what appears to be some combination of lederhosen and a bondage harness. You right away begin thinning out the local boar and scarpid population. You pick some cactus apples and eventually assault a warlock coven next door. The best part, however, is when very early on you're handed a club and you're instructed to go find the lazy peons around the valley. Not to encourage or to motivate or to help build a healthy work culture. No, you're instructed to physically assault the exhausted laborers until they stand up and get back to work. And just like that, you learn the main guiding principle of Orcish society. If a problem exists, hit it until it no longer exists. Moving out from the Valley of Trials, you encounter the Darkspear Trolls of Sen'jin Village, who have you kill some Kultiran Marines nearby, and then kill some other trolls because the trolls are having some internal troll problem, which you'll come to find out is a way more common occurrence than you'd think. Then you make your way north to Razor Hill, where you get some pretty basic errands to run. Here you'll have your first of many run-ins with Quillboar, a disgusting species of pig-porcupine hybrid things that have already laid claim to this specific area of the Sunbaked Litterbox, and they are not very happy at the arrival of the Horde. Upon finishing those errands, the leadership in Razor Hill is very impressed by your cognitive ability to perform completely mundane tasks like go here, kill that, and they think you'd be a perfect fit for Barrens duty. And so you're sent off with a conscription letter and directed to make your way to the crossroads over in the Barrens. But before you make your way to the Barrens, you make a little detour farther north of Razor Hill, where you'll arrive in Orgrimmar, proud capital of the Horde. At first glance, Orgrimmar is a city constructed seemingly entirely out of an interesting combination of mud and jagged spikes. There's a real tribalistic, utilitarian, brutalist vibe here that it may be off-putting to some. To you, it's home. For now, though, you depart Orgrimmar just as quickly as you arrived because you have somewhere else very special waiting for you just a short jog away, the Barrens. But first, you hear in passing about some cultists living in a lava cave directly underneath the city, and it's filled with more of those warlocks. This is Ragefire Chasm, your first dungeon. To keep it short, because RFC is about as interesting as you'd expect a level 13 to 18 dungeon to be, you and 4 other freshly sprouted adventurers descend into the network of magma tunnels, kill some trogs, some elementals, some demons, some cultists. You and your buddies take care of business, get a few copper and a green item or two for your trouble, and are unceremoniously sent on your way. Making your way southwest from Orgrimmar, you enter the Barrens. Here, there are no mountains. There are no flight paths where you want them, and everything is always farther away than you remember. It is an endless expanse of yellow grass and serves as the primary stomping ground for the lowly Horde adventurers here on Kalimdor. It is a place where the human mind, starved of visual stimuli, turns to primal mimetics for survival. And if there exists something like a purgatory in this universe, it's probably a lot like the Barrens. Divided loosely into a northern savanna and a southern scrubland, the area is largely populated by more Quillboar, centaurs, raptors, kodos, hyenas, zebras, and many other life forms hell-bent on ending your existence. The main hub here is the Crossroads, a cluster of tents, vendors, and an overwhelming number of quests that all seemingly point in opposite directions. The Crossroads will be your home, your anchor, and your tether to civilization for the foreseeable future. So get used to it. And once you arrive, you're not given any grand missions. Nothing fancy or flashy. Instead, you have a series of small humiliations piled onto you, like thinning out the local planestrider population, poaching Zevra to make use of their hooves, killing raptors because, well, this one's actually a pretty good idea, and then culling lions for reasons. You spend much of your early days here as the outpost's poorly paid sanitation worker, and eventually you find a rhythm and start stitching these mindless tasks into something bigger. Because the animals aren't really the problem. The problem is the Barrens is already occupied. Starting with the Quillboar, let's go over a little background. They are a very ancient race, born from the earth and the corpse of Agamagan, a divine colossal boar who fought the demons of the Burning Legion during the War of the Ancients, literally 10,000 years before you were born. When he was slain in that war, a vast tangle of thorns and brambles rose from the ground, and it's from this Razorfen that the Quillboar emerged, and it's where they now reside. Simply put, they've been here thousands of years, before the Orcs even knew what this planet was, and they are not happy with your arrival now. Up to the northwest from the crossroads is where the Witchwing Harpies have established themselves in towering nesting sites. Harpies are a fact of life in Kalimdor and are very territorial, intelligent, and deeply hostile to anything that isn't a harpy. These specific harpies have been stealing supplies from Horde caravans, driving off planestriders, and occasionally they descend on isolated, unsuspecting travelers. And so you spend some time engaging in a bit of orcish diplomacy, and clear out nest after nest until you've reached some arbitrary number of corpses at your feet. The Kolkar are a clan of centaurs that have been raiding Horde caravans in Tauren villages. The centaur as a species descend from the demigod Cenarius and are in the middle of a civil war across multiple clans, but they still manage to find time in between fighting one another to also be huge pains in the ass to everyone else. You murder a few, take out their leadership, but these things are going to be a common occurrence for a bit. Due east from the crossroads, where the Barrens slides down to the rocky coast, you find the goblin port town of Ratchet. The goblins here are nominally neutral. They'll trade with anyone, supply anyone, and provide their services to anyone. But they do have a healthy working relationship with the Horde. The work you'll get here is varied. You'll fight some pirates, find some stolen cargo, and help locate a 99-year-old bottle of port. Which, speaking of, will bring you here, to the Wailing Caverns, the first proper dungeon of your journey. To make a long story short, there was this night elf druid named Naxxramas who wanted to restore the Barrens to a verdant green land rich with water and growth because he figured that the Barrens wasn't a natural desert, but a wounded land scarred by catastrophe. So he descended into the caverns, consumed copious amounts of psilocybin and DMT, and entered the Emerald Dream to start doing some druid shit to fix the Barrens. Well, that clearly hasn't worked out too well because apparently Naxxramas is having one hell of a bad trip, and has instead found himself overtaken by the Emerald Nightmare. The exact opposite of the dream. So as a result, all that druid shit he was trying to do to fix things is actually now actively corrupting everything within the caverns. And to make it even better, his druid disciples have also been corrupted by the Nightmare, taking on the form of the Serpent and stylizing themselves as the Druids of the Fang. So now it's up to you and 4 other adventurers to strap on your boots of mighty ass-kicking and take care of the issue. Simply put, the Wailing Caverns is quite literally a winding snake pit of tunnels and chambers, and is predictably filled with deviant raptors, deviant serpents, and the corrupted druids who have names like Lady Anacondra and Lord Cobran. You'll even fight a giant corrupted plant thing named Verdun the Everliving, who hits like a Mack truck, but also doesn't really live up to his name because he dies too. Then, deep in the cavern, you'll find Naxxramas himself, still fast asleep and bound in the Nightmare. The druid who accompanied you inside the cavern performs a ritual to wake him up finally, but the corruption is not too keen to let Naxxramas go, so you fight off some stuff and eventually take down this giant Murloc thing named Mutinous the Devourer. When all that is wrapped up, Naxxramas finally wakes up, daps you up, and then finally gets the hell out of that cave. When you finally find yourself emerging back to the surface, you're not entirely sure that you've really fixed anything, but at least you've stopped things from getting worse, I guess. After your time in the Wailing Caverns, you make your way back to the crossroads, and it's here that you come across a solitary orc by the name of Manrik. He doesn't shout, he doesn't posture, he just shares his story with you. He and his wife battled the Quillboar farther down the road south at a Tauren camp. They got overwhelmed and he was struck down. When he awoke, his wounds were being tended to by a Tauren druid, but there were no signs of his wife. And so he asks you to help find some sign of her. So you head south on the lookout for Mankrik's wife, thinking to yourself the entire time, where Mankrik's wife? Eventually though, you come across a nondescript camp along the southern road matching Mankrik's description, and it's here that you finally come across a beaten corpse that apparently is, or rather was, Mankrik's wife. So you head back and deliver the news to Manrik, who is understandably hell-bent on committing some serious war crimes against the Quillboar now. It's probably around this time your level's into the 20s or so, and you're probably sick of staring at the endless expanse of the Barrens. So it might be time to move on. But before you completely say goodbye to the region, there's a couple detours worth making, and the first takes you northwest into the Stonetalon Mountains. The Stonetalon Range sits between Ashenvale to the north and the bleak hellscape of Desolace to the southwest. And the Horde has a vested interest in the area because the Venture Company, which is an organization committed to environmental destruction, the exploitation of labor, and just generally being kind of evil, has set up shop in Stonetalon, and they are systematically clear-cutting every tree that they see. and they're poisoning the water with industrial runoff, and they're filling the sky with enough airborne pollution that the local wildlife has gone homicidal with rage. Your base of operations here is Sunrock Retreat, a Tauren settlement halfway up the mountainside run by shamans and druids who are desperately trying to undo the ecological catastrophe unfolding around them. The Tauren here don't want you to conquer anything. Instead, they want you to help the land heal, which is a weird request for an orc, but whatever. You're sent to deal with the Adventure Company's operations, which culminates in climbing an enormous industrial platform overlooking the devastation of Windshear Crag to kill their local boss. But the Adventure Company isn't the only problem. Down near the Barrens border, the Grim Totem Tauren, a renegade clan who will become a recurring pain in the ass as well, have seized a village and taken hostages. You fight through their camp and free a Tauren woman named Kaya Flathoof, and learn an important lesson. Not all Tauren are peace-loving, earth-hugging cows. Some of them are scheming, backstabbing opportunists who will betray the Horde at the first chance they get. Farther south is the Charred Vale, which used to be a lush green forest until the Venture Company's destruction pissed off the local elementals so badly that the entire valley is now a scorched wasteland crawling with fire elementals, harpies, and basilisks. Not much to do here at this point, blow off some steam and get to killing again. Stonetalon's a short zone, and you're not here for very long, so you make your way onwards. Heading north from the Stonetalon Ridge, or more accurately I guess, circling back to the Barrens and heading northwest from the crossroads, you enter Ashenvale. Ashenvale is a 10,000-year-old forest. The trees here are ancient. The rivers glow with moonlight, and this is Night Elf territory, sacred and very zealously guarded. And the Horde is here, cutting it all down. Which kind of brings a funny point to light. It doesn't seem that the Horde is beefing with the Venture Company because they're destroying the environment. It seems like the Horde is beefing with them because the Horde wants to be the ones destroying the environment. Your base here is Splinter Tree Post, a fortified military outpost deep in the heart of contested Night Elf land. And let's be clear, this is not a village or a settlement. This is a forward operating base. The reason you're here is lumber. Thrall needs resources to build Orgrimmar and sustain the Horde, and the ancient trees in Ashenvale are the closest and richest source of timber around. The Warsong lumber camp that's run by the remnants of Grom Hellscream's Warsong clan is where the actual logging happens, and the Night Elves hate it and you with a burning passion that really transcends mere politics and enters the realm of the spiritual. And, you know, the thing is that they're not entirely wrong to be angry. You're chopping down a forest that predates your entire existence by thousands of years, but you're also not completely wrong to need wood. I mean, the Horde has to build, and the trees are there, so gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. Your quests at Splinter Tree revolve around securing the Horde's foothold by disrupting Night Elf supply lines, gathering intelligence, and killing Night Elves. Over at the Zoramgar outpost on the western coast, you deal with Naga infesting the beaches and get pointed towards Black Fathom Deeps, an underwater dungeon built inside of a submerged temple where Twilight's Hammer cultists are trying to wake up a Hydra servant of the old gods. It's the first time you encounter cosmic-level evil. You know, the ancient alien wrongness that makes the Burning Legion kind of look like a bunch of scrubs. But the real juicy bit in Ashenvale, and the reason this zone matters more than any other for your orc, is in the southeast corner of the forest. Here, past Fellfire Hill, where lesser demons still linger like roaches after a fumigation, lies Demon Fall Canyon, where Grom Hellscream killed Manaroth. A bit of context if you need it. Manaroth was the pit lord whose blood the orcs drank. He's literally the demon whose curse turned your entire race into mindless killing machines, shattered your homeworld, and led to decades of enslavement. Grom Hellscream, the chieftain of the Warsong, was the first orc to drink the blood, and the last to fight back. And he stood in this very canyon alongside Thrall and buried his axe Gorehowl into Manaroth's chest. The resulting explosion killed Manaroth, but killed Grom too. But it was in that moment the blood curse was broken, and the orcs were free. A memorial stone stands in the canyon now, surrounded by the lingering remnants of lesser demons who refuse to leave. And the inscription reads, "Here lies Gromash Hellscream, chieftain of the Warsong clan. In many ways, the curse of our people began and ended with Grom. His name meant giant's heart in our ancient tongue. He earned that name 100-fold, as he stood alone before the demon Manaroth, and won our freedom with his blood. Loktar Ogar, big brother, may the Warsong never fade." Heading south from the Barrens, and I mean directly south, off the edge of a cliff, you take the Great Lift, 2 enormous wooden platforms that shuttle you down a sheer rock face into the Thousand Needles. The first time you ride the Great Lift, you stare straight down into a yawning canyon of towering stone pillars and a distant canyon floor, and wonder yourself if this bit of engineering is OSHA compliant. It's not, but it works. And at the bottom, you enter a zone that feels pretty different compared to the flat, sun-baked monotony of the Barrens. The Thousand Needles is Tauren country, a vast mesa and canyon landscape of soaring stone spires. And your hub here is Freewind Post, a Tauren village built on top of one of those needles, accessible only by a rickety elevator that, like the Great Lift, is most certainly not OSHA compliant. The views from up here are actually spectacular though. The entire canyon floor spreads out below you and you can see for miles, but the problems are familiar. The Galax Centaur have set up shop in the canyon and are raiding Tauren settlements because, of course they are, and the Grim Totem Tauren you dealt with in Stonetalon have built a compound at Dark Cloud Pinnacle, atop of one of the mesas where they're kidnapping villagers. You scale the mesa, fight through their goons, and free the prisoners. At this point, Grim Totem, and honestly at this point, the Grim Totem, the Centaurs, and the Quillboar, are becoming the recurring villains that just won't go away, almost like a particularly bad case of herpes. But the real gem of Thousand Needles is at the southern end where the canyons flatten out to a vast, blinding white salt pan called the Shimmering Flats. And here, in the middle of this blistering emptiness, goblins and gnomes are racing rocket cars. Also, side note, I've seen enough in my years to know the geography of these zones was not accidental. This is the Mirage Raceway, and it is exactly as ridiculous as it sounds. Two teams, one goblin, one gnome, are competing to build the fastest land vehicle, and they both want your help, primarily in the form of sabotaging the other side. You gather rocket fuel components, steal blueprints, gather parts, and generally serve as an unpaid pit crew for a motorsport event happening in the middle of a war-torn continent. It's absurd, but after dozens of levels just killing wildlife, fighting Centaur, and watching people die, you're delivering car parts to a gnome named Fizzle Brassbolts. From the Thousand Needles, it's time to circle back around and address some unfinished business. I know you haven't forgotten the Quillboar, but remember that Razorfen I was talking about? You know, that massive tangle of thorns that came from the corpse of Agamagan? You're going inside now. Razorfen Kraul is the Quillboar's house, and you're kicking in the door FBI style. The dungeon is built inside the Razorfen itself with organic tunnels winding through enormous roots and brambles, almost like you're crawling through the intestines of a giant thorny organism. The Quillboar here aren't the disorganized raiders you fought in the Barrens. They have infrastructure, leadership, and a matriarch named Charlgra Razorflank, who has been coordinating the Quillboar aggression against the Horde from the beginning. You and your fellow adventurers fight your way through war leaders and shamans and a huge boar beast called Agathalos the Raging, and eventually you put Charlgra Razorflank down, which doesn't exactly solve the Quillboar problem, but it does cut the head off the snake for a while. There's also a goblin named Willix the Importer here trapped inside who you can escort out. But now for an important note, you will be coming back to the Razorfen later, and what you find then will be considerably worse. But we'll get to that. West of Stonetalon, through the Charred Vale, and down into the lowest, grayest, most soul-crushingly bleak corner of Kalimdor, lies the aptly named Desolace. Desolace is a gray, wind-blasted wasteland of bones, ruins, and more goddamn centaur. The sky is perpetually overcast, lightning cracks in the distance, and the ground is littered with the skeletons of things that wandered in and never wandered back out. If the Barrens was purgatory, Desolace is Hell's waiting room. The Horde has two settlements here. Ghostwalker Post, a Tauren camp overlooking the Kodo graveyard where ancient Kodos come to die, and Shadowprey Village, a Darkspear troll fishing hamlet on the western coast that honestly feels a bit less like a settlement and more like a group of people who got lost and just decided, hell with it, and I'll just hang out here. The Centaur are the main event here, though. Desolace is where the Centaur were born. Like, literally. Their entire species crawled out of a cavern here. And 4 tribes occupy the zone. The Kolkar, the Magrum, the Gelkis, and the Maraudon. And they all hate each other almost as much as they hate you. And you have to choose a side. You have to ally with either the Gelkis or the Magrum, and to do so, you have to kill the other tribe's members until the one you've chosen likes you enough to start offering you quests. So yeah, you're exploiting a civil war. It's ugly, it's manipulative, but it's incredibly effective. But the Centaur aren't even arguably the worst thing here. In the south-central part of the zone sits the Manrik Coven. This is a full-scale Burning Blade cult outpost, crawling with fellhounds, doom warders, succubi, and demonic constructs. Remember the Burning Blade from Ragefire Chasm? Back when you were level 13 and thought a few warlocks in a cave was a big deal? Yeah, they've got an entire compound here, and they're performing rituals that would make those early cultists look like amateurs. And you're sent to disrupt their operations and kill their leadership, including the warlock Jugkar Grimrod and the demon Lord Azrathok. And it's around this time a realization sits in, and it's around this time a realization settles in. The Burning Blade is not an Orgrimmar problem. Apparently, it's an everywhere problem. But most importantly, Desolace also contains the entrance to Maraudon, a dungeon you likely won't tackle until a little bit later, but the lore setup is here. Deep in the Valley of Spears, in the heart of Maraudon Centaur territory, lies the tomb of Zaatar, firstborn son of the demigod Cenarius, who made the catastrophic mistake of falling in love with the princess Theradras, this BBW Earth elemental. Their union produced a centaur, who immediately murdered Zaatar out of shame at their own ungodly existence. Theradras hid Zaatar's body in a crystal cavern where his death blessing caused an underground paradise to bloom. The dungeon is half pristine hidden garden, half corrupted elemental nightmare, and at the bottom sits Theradras herself, thick as hell, grotesque, and grieving for millennia over the corpse of her murdered lover. It's actually kind of sad, right until she tries to crush you into paste. East of the Barrens, the land collapses into a vast, stinking, mosquito-infested swamp called Dustwallow Marsh. And this is politically complicated territory. On an island off the eastern coast sits Theramore, Jaina Proudmore's city, and the Alliance's largest stronghold in Kalimdor, which was founded after the Third War. Your base here is Brackenwall Village, and here's the thing about Brackenwall. It's run by ogres. The Stonemaul ogres allied with the Horde after the half-orc Rexar united them during the founding of Durotar, and their overlord, a charming individual named Mok Morok, has been leading them with all the tactical sophistication you'd expect from an ogre named Mok Morok. The Stonemaul used to live farther south in the Stonemaul village, but the Black Dragonflight attacked and drove them out. The ogres want revenge, and they want you to help them get it, which brings us to the real juicy bit of Dustwallow Marsh, the dragons. The southern swamps are crawling with black dragon spawn, and deep in the worm bog hides the lair of Onyxia, daughter of Deathwing, and one of the most powerful and dangerous beings on the planet right now. She's been manipulating both the Alliance and the Horde from the shadows. In Stormwind, she's disguised as a human noblewoman whispering in the King Regent's ear, and the breadcrumb quests leading to her discovery and eventual confrontation represent one of the longest, most involved, convoluted chains in the game. You won't fight Onyxia for a while yet, but you know she's there. And she knows you're here. And the fact that she operates through deception and manipulation rather than brute force makes her the most un-orcish enemy you've ever faced. Because you can't hit deception until it stops being a problem. You have to be smarter than that. For an orc, it's a tall order. At some point in your late 30s or early 40s, you take a zeppelin from Orgrimmar to Gromgol Base Camp in Stranglethorn Vale, and your adventure expands from a continental conflict to a global one. Stranglethorn is a dense, humid, suffocating tropical jungle on the southern tip of the Eastern Kingdoms. You know, the continent your ancestors invaded during the First and Second Wars. And it's the continent where the old Horde conquered kingdoms and eventually was shattered. Gromgol was established during those wars and never really fully abandoned. Standing here, you're really walking in the footsteps of the original Horde. Stranglethorn is enormous. It stretches from Gromgol in the northwest to Booty Bay at the southern tip, and is packed with more hostile creatures per square yard than any zone you visited so far. You'll spend a lot of time here too, and the primary activity is murder, specifically the systematic and escalating murder of the local wildlife at the behest of Hemet Nessingwary, the greatest big game hunter in Azeroth. Nessingwary's hunting camp sits on the northern jungle, and he issues what amount to kill contracts. Hunt young raptors, then elder raptors, then the patriarch. Hunt young tigers, then elder tigers, then the patriarch. Panthers, same deal. Each chain ends with tracking down a named elite beast. The final hunt sends you after King Bangalash, a massive white tiger, and killing him earns you the title of Big Game Hunter in everything but the actual game. The Trolls of Stranglethorn are another major story thread. The Gurubashi Empire once ruled this entire jungle. They were a vast troll civilization that collapsed when their gods abandoned them. Now, the surviving Gurubashi are scattered through the ruins and camps across the zone, split into warring tribes, like the Bloodscalps, the Skullsplitters, and others. They're hostile to everyone, including each other, and your quests involve disrupting their operations, stealing their artifacts, and killing their leadership. In the northeast corner of the zone looms Zul'Farrak, the ancient Gurubashi capital, sealed behind massive walls. You can't go in yet, but we'll come back to that. And then there's Booty Bay, the goblin pirate town at the very bottom of the map, run by Baron Revelgaz of the Steamweedle Cartel. Booty Bay is a neutral port city where anything goes. Pirates, merchants, assassins, and adventurers from both factions crowd the docks, and the quests here are refreshingly simple. Fight the Bloodsail Buccaneers who threaten the town, recover stolen cargo, hunt pirates on the coast, and generally live out your swashbuckling fantasies. But when you finally emerge from the jungle canopy covered in raptor blood and tiger fur and carrying a bag full of the Green Hills of Stranglethorn pages that you've been collecting this entire time, you're no longer just a Kalimdor orc. You're an adventurer of the world. But now it's time to go home, but not for rest. You return to Kalimdor because there's unfinished business in the Razorfen, and what you find in the Razorfen is considerably worse than just Quilboar. Razorfen Downs is a sister dungeon to Razorfen Kraul. Same thorn thickets, same boar corpse architecture, but something has sort of changed since your last visit. A lich named Amnenar the Coldbringer has moved in, and he's brought the Scourge with him. The Quilboar burial grounds, which you might have fought through in RFK without thinking much about them, are now full of risen dead. The Quilboar's honored ancestors have been ripped from their graves and reanimated as undead servants. Skeletons shamble through the tunnels, banshees wail in the darkness. You also encounter Balnistraz, a red dragon disguised as a human who asks you to protect him while he performs a ritual to cleanse the corruption. And the fact that an actual dragon considers this threat serious enough to personally intervene should tell you everything you need to know. At the end, there is Amnenar the Coldbringer himself, a direct servant of the Lich King, commanding the dead from its deepest chamber. And this is the moment the Scourge stops being an Eastern Kingdom's problem and becomes your problem. In RFK, the Quilboar were your enemies, but they were still alive. They had like a culture or something, like a religion, I guess, a purpose probably, but now they're just puppets. And this is what the Scourge does to everything it touches. It doesn't just conquer you, it erases you. The dead don't even get the dignity of suffering. And as an orc who knows what it means to be enslaved, the Scourge should terrify you, because this is that same slavery perfected. No will, no resistance, no freedom, just obedience, forever. So if they can reach this far south into Kalimdor, nowhere is safe. South of the Thousand Needles, past the shimmering flats and the rocket cars and the last scraps of comic relief, lies the blistering wasteland of Tanaris. If Durotar was a sun-baked litterbox, Tanaris is what happens when the litterbox gets lit on fire. This is a proper desert, complete with endless sand dunes and scorching heat. The main settlement is Gadgetzan, yet another Steamweedle Cartel goblin town, walled and fortified against the desert's many, many things that want to kill you. Gadgetzan is also where you meet Marin Noggenfogger, a down-on-his-luck goblin who sends you on a quest chain that eventually rewards you the famous Noggenfogger elixir, a consumable that randomly shrinks you, turns you into a skelly boy, or gives you slow fall. It's really one of the most beloved items that you will receive, and you will carry stacks of it with you the rest of your time. Waste Wander bandits have taken over the desert's water supply, and obviously water is an essential currency in Tanaris, so you spend some time liberating those wells and culling their numbers. And there's some South Sea pirates that are infesting the Lost Rigger Cove on the coast, and then there's some Dune Maul ogres that are causing some problems somewhere else. All standard fare stuff. The real attraction, though, is Zul'Farrak. Zul'Farrak is a massive outdoor troll city in the northwestern desert, home to the Sand Fury trolls, and the centerpiece is the Stairway event. Here's how it works. You free a group of prisoners caged on top of a massive steep pyramid. They join your side, and then what feels like the entire Sand Fury civilization comes charging up the stairs at you, wave after wave after wave. You stand at the top, fighting downward, bodies piling up on the steps, and for about 5 minutes you feel like an absolute god of war. It's the single best set-piece encounter in any dungeon up to this point, and it alone justifies the entire trip to Tanaris. The other notable thing in Zul'Farrak is Gazrilla, who is a massive hydra you can summon by striking a sacred gong with the Mallet of Zul'Farrak, which you had to acquire from a separate quest in the hinterlands. Gazrilla erupts from the pool in a spray of water and immediately tries to kill everyone. But you take him down, and in return, you get the coveted carrot on a stick. And you also pass near the Caverns of Time in the Eastern Mountains, that is currently sealed and guarded by the Bronze Dragonflight. The Bronze Dragons guard the flow of time itself, apparently, and while you can't enter the caverns just yet, Their presence is deeply significant. Something powerful sleeps here, and even the dragons seem a little nervous about it. And you start seeing Silithid hives in the southern desert. And while they might seem like a relatively minor inconvenience now, they are not minor. But you don't know that yet. Then, making your way back through the Thousand Needles to the west lies Feralas? We're going with Feralas. Another lush, humid jungle forest that feels like a different planet compared to the wastelands you've been slogging through the last few levels. Your hub here is Camp Mohachi, a Tauren camp on the eastern edge, and the primary antagonists here are the Gorduni ogres who have occupied the ancient ruins throughout the zone. And, of course, the Grim Totem show up again, and at this point you should probably just assume that any zone containing Tauren also contains Grim Totem. But the real cool reason why Feralas matters is Dire Maul. Dire Maul is an ancient highborn night elf city called Eldrithalas, a repository of arcane knowledge that survived the Sundering 10,000 years ago. It has since been occupied by ogres, corrupted by demons, and haunted by the ghosts of the highborn who built it. It's split into 3 wings, and each one tells a different story. Dire Maul East is overgrown with jungle growth and ruled by a satyr named Alzin the Wild Shaper, who has been corrupting the plant life. Feral treants, slashers, and just generally speaking, everything here wants to kill you, from the grass to the trees. Dire Maul West, on the other hand, is where it gets a little bit more interesting. The highborn who built Eldrithalas imprisoned a demon named Imulthar inside the city, and have been feeding off his demonic energy to sustain their immortality for 10,000 years. Over time, that system broke down, the highborn started dying, and their leader, Prince Tortheldrin, began murdering his own people to hoard the remaining power for himself. You fight through arcane constructs and highborn ghosts, disable the pylons imprisoning the demon, kill Imulthar, and then kill Tortheldrin, who has been slaughtering his own civilization in slow motion for a millennia to stay alive. He's a monster, but a monster born from desperation. And there's something a little tragic about an immortal being so terrified of death that he'll destroy everything he was supposed to protect to avoid it. Dire Maul North is the Ogre Wing, ruled by King Gordok, and it's famous for the tribute run. If you're clever enough to bypass or deal with the other bosses without killing them before you reach the king, you can kill Gordok and the surviving ogres will hail you as their new king and offer better loot. It's one of those rare moments where being smart is explicitly rewarded over being thorough, and being crowned the king of the ogres is deeply, deeply satisfying. And now the adventure pivots. You've spent the bulk of your career on Kalimdor, fighting Centaur, clearing out the Quillboar, felling trolls, and slowly expanding the Horde's footprint across a continent. But the threats have been escalating, and the next phase of your journey takes you deep into the Eastern Kingdoms, to the doorstep of the biggest, most content-dense piece of real estate in the entire game. Searing Gorge is a volcanic wasteland dominated by the Dark Iron Dwarves, a clan of fire-worshipping maniacs who serve Ragnaros the Fire Lord from deep inside Blackrock Mountain. The landscape is oppressive. Lava pools, blackened rock, permanent haze, and in the center, the Cauldron, a massive open pit mining operation where the Dark Iron Dwarves use slave labor to extract resources for their Fire Lord. You spend your time here disrupting their operations, freeing prisoners, and dealing with the Thorium Brotherhood, a breakaway faction of Dark Iron Dwarves who've rejected Ragnaros' rule and will trade their master-tier crafting recipes for rare materials. But the Searing Gorge is really just the on-ramp, because at the northern edge of the zone, looming against the sky like a giant volcanic middle finger aimed at the heavens, stands Blackrock Mountain. This single mountain contains Blackrock Depths, the largest dungeon in the game, Lower Blackrock Spire, Upper Blackrock Spire, Molten Core, and Blackwing Lair. More endgame content than most games contain in their entirety, packed into one mountain. So yeah, you'll be spending a lot of time here. Moving north from Searing Gorge, you enter the Burning Steppes, a charred, blackened wasteland directly adjacent to Blackrock Mountain, where the Black Dragonflight has established a major presence. Nefarian, the son of Deathwing and brother of Onyxia, commands his forces from Blackwing Lair up the mountain's peak, conducting experiments to breed chromatic dragons, or hybrids of all 5 dragonflights that would give him an unstoppable army. But there's a more personal enemy here, the Blackrock Orcs, remnants of the old Horde who refused to join Thrall. They serve Nefarian and his puppet war chief Rend Blackhand, who claims to be the true war chief of the true Horde. These orcs chose servitude to dragons over the freedom that Thrall offered. They are a dark mirror, a vision of what your people would have become if Grom had never swung Gorehowl, if Thrall had never broken the chains. Looking at the Blackrock Orcs, you see the old ways. Blood, rage, and obedience. And you know with absolute certainty that your Horde chose correctly. The Onyxia attunement chain runs through here as well. You're assembling the pieces needed to expose the dragon and access her lair back in Dustwallow Marsh. And the UBRS key quest sends you through Lower Blackrock Spire, gathering fragments and defeating bosses to forge the Seal of Ascension that will open the gates to the Upper Blackrock Spire, and the confrontation with Ren Blackhand himself. And then you go to the Plaguelands, and the adventure becomes a horror story. The Western Plaguelands is what happens when the Scourge wins. This was Lordaeron, a human kingdom of farms, villages, churches, and ordinary people living ordinary lives. And then Arthas, the prince who became the Lich King's champion, marched through here with an army of the undead and turned it all to ash and bone. You enter from the Bulwark, a forsaken checkpoint on the border of Tirisfal Glades, and the change is immediate. The sky darkens, the ground is gray and rotting, the trees are dead, ruined farmsteads dot the landscape, and in every one of them the former occupants still shamble around, mindless undead going through the motions of lives they no longer remember. The Scourge maintains plague cauldrons throughout the zone, massive bubbling vats that spew blight into the air, keeping the land corrupted. You're sent to destroy them. Kill the guards, take the key, neutralize the cauldron. There are 4 of them, and the quest chain feels less like an adventure and more like a public health operation in a disaster zone. Anderhall, once a major human city, is now a ruined wasteland controlled by the Scourge. Skeletons and ghosts patrol the streets that used to be markets and thoroughfares. Scholomance, the school of necromancy established by Kel'Thuzad before he became a lich, is a basement full of undead students, and necromancer professors still conduct classes in the art of raising the undead. The island above is haunted by the ghosts of farmers who don't know that they're dead, going about their daily routines while a horror factory operates beneath their feet. Hearthglen in the northwest is held by the Scarlet Crusade, fanatical human zealots who want to purge all undead, including the forsaken members of your Horde. They are not your allies. They are barely sane, and their commander here, High Lord Talon Fordring, is a tragic figure whose story will break your heart in the next zone. And up to this point, nothing you've faced has prepared you for this. The Quilboar just wanted you off their land, the Centaur just wanted to kill you, the demons just wanted your soul, the Scourge, they want your body, and it doesn't care about the rest. Every corpse here was a person, a farmer, a soldier, a child, and now they're tools. And as an orc who knows what it means to have your will stripped away, the Scourge hits with a particular kind of horror. This is enslavement taken to its absolute endpoint. No rebellion is possible, no freedom to fight for, nothing left to free. Eastern Plagueland is the heart of darkness. If Western Plaguelands is the front line, EPL is where the Scourge won so completely that resistance is almost an afterthought. The corruption here is absolute. The land is thoroughly dead. The undead are everywhere, and the few pockets of the living are desperately clinging to existence. Your base is Light's Hope Chapel, headquarters of the Argent Dawn, a neutral faction dedicated to fighting the Scourge regardless of Horde or Alliance allegiance. The chapel sits on sacred ground. Thousands of paladin souls are buried beneath it, and their collective spiritual weight makes it one of the few places the Scourge literally cannot take. You build Argent Dawn reputation here that will become critical later for the Naxxramas attunement. The Horde's champion in this zone is Nathanos Blightcaller, a Forsaken Ranger, formerly a human, and the only one ever admitted to the Farstrider ranks of Quel'Thalas. Sylvanas sends you to him personally, and Nathanos is exactly what you'd expect from an undead elite operative. Arrogant, demanding, ruthless, and devastatingly effective. He sends you on increasingly dangerous missions where you hunt elite Scourge commanders, you gather intelligence, and prove your worth through violence. He doesn't care that you're an orc. He cares that you can kill. But the crown jewel of the Eastern Plaguelands is Tyrion Fordring. You find him living as a hermit by the Thranduil River, a seemingly broken old man in a crumbling cottage. He gives you some busy work at first, like kill some plague bats, collect some carrion grubs, standard trash quests. You do them without much thinking about it. And then he tells you who he is. Tyrion Fordring was High Lord of the Order of the Silver Hand, the most prestigious paladin order in human history, and he was one of the original 5 paladins, a hero of the Second War, Lord of the Mardenhold Keep, and he was stripped of everything, his titles, his home, his family, and exiled. And what was his crime? He defended an orc named Eitrigg, wounded and alone in human territory. Tyrion found him, tended to his wounds, and when the Alliance demanded Eitrigg's execution, Tyrion refused. He chose honor over obedience, mercy over law, and they destroyed him for it. And this is directly, personally relevant to you. An orc is the reason this man lost everything, and now you, another orc, are helping him find his way back. The chain takes you through recovering his old warhammer, where robbers have been digging for valuables, and fighting off the grave robbers who spring on you when you disturb the site. And then you search Northdale for a symbol of his son Talin's lost honor. Then Cardero for a family portrait. Each step peels back another layer of this man's devastation. And then comes In Dreams. Tyrion tells you that his son Talon, the boy he watched grow up from exile, the child he couldn't protect, has become the High Lord of the Scarlet Crusade at Hearthglen. Talon believes he's fighting for justice. He doesn't know the crusade has been corrupted from within. Tyrion asks you to go to Hearthglen in disguise and reach his son. So you infiltrate the Scarlet Crusade's fortress, find Talon, convince him of the truth, and Talon defects. He walks out of Hearthglen with you, fighting through his own former soldiers. And then Grand Inquisitor Ysilian, the true power behind the crusade in Hearthglen, arrives with his guards, and he kills Talon right in front of you, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Then Tyrion appears, the broken hermit, the exile, the man who lost everything for showing mercy to an orc, and he slimes Ysilian. And over the body of his dead son, Tyrion Fordring vows to rebuild the Order of the Silver Hand, to create something new from the ashes of everything he lost. And it's a pretty powerful moment in the game, and the fact that it exists inside the same game where you beat sleeping peons with a club in the Valley of Trials is what makes Classic what it is. At level 58 and above, the endgame dungeons open up, and they come fast. Blackrock Depths is less of a dungeon and more of an underground city. It contains a prison, a gladiator arena, a dwarven bar, a massive vault, and the throne of Emperor Dagran Thorison, ruler of the Dark Iron Dwarves, who has kidnapped the Bronzebeard Princess Moira and married her in what is generously described as a coercive arrangement. Clearing BRD in its entirety takes hours. It's exhausting, labyrinthian, and weirdly one of the most beloved dungeons in the game. Also, down at the very bottom is the portal to the Molten Core, so you'll be coming back here a lot. Lower Blackrock Spire has you fighting through the Blackrock Orc and Ogre stronghold, spiders, trolls, ogres, and Overlord Wormthalak at the end. You're here primarily for the key quest to Upper Blackrock Spire. Upper Blackrock Spire is the big one. This is where Rend Blackhand sits on his stolen throne, calling himself War Chief, commanding the Blackrock Orcs in Nefarian service. You fight through his entire court, face his dragon mount, and eventually kill General Dracasath, a massive dragonkin who guards the entrance to Blackwing Lair. UBRS is the checkpoint between dungeon player and raider, so if you can clear this, you can probably handle what comes next. Stratholme is split into two. The Scarlet Crusade's living side, where you discover that Grand Crusader Dathrahan is actually the Dreadlord Balnazar in disguise, meaning the Scarlet Crusade has been manipulated by demons this entire time, which is a horrifying revelation. And the Undead side, where Baron Rivendare commands the Scourge forces and drops a Death Charger mount with a drop rate of approximately never. Stratholme is also the city where Arthas culled the infected citizens before his fall, and walking through the ruins of that atrocity lends a weight to the dungeon that few others can match. And Scholomance, the school of necromancy beneath Cardero. Darkmaster Gandling runs the place, and his students are still studying. They just happen to be undead. You fight through the classrooms of risen students and spectral professors in what is easily the most thematically disturbing dungeon. And then finally it's time for the raids. Molten Core is your first. 40 players descend to the bottom of Blackrock Depths into the volcanic heart of the mountain, where Ragnaros the Fire Lord, an elemental lord summoned by the Dark Iron Dwarves a long time ago in a ritual that shattered the mountain and created the volcanic wasteland around it, rules over a domain of magma, fire elementals, and core hounds. The trash is brutal, the bosses are numerous, and coordination is required unlike anything you've experienced up to this point. And when you reach the end and Ragnaros erupts from the lava, it's one of the most iconic moments in the game. A colossal elemental lord rising from magma, hammer in hand, screaming about insects. Onyxia's lair is a single boss back in Dustwallow Marsh. 40 players enter a cave and fight a dragon. That's it. She takes flight, breathes fire across the chamber, spawns whelps from eggs, and generally demonstrates why she's been manipulating nations from the shadows instead of fighting head-on. She's also the dragon whose attunement chain you've been working on since the Burning Steps, and taking her down is deeply satisfying. Blackwing Lair sits atop Blackrock Mountain, where Nefarian conducts his experiments. His chromatic dragon project is nearly complete, and his laboratory is full of failed experiments, enslaved dragonkin, and the tools of his trade. The final fight against Nefarian himself takes place on a rooftop where he can call upon the abilities of all 5 dragonflights, corrupting your own class abilities mid-fight. He's theatrical, intelligent, and the last of the Blackrock Mountain villains. When he falls, the mountain is finally free. Then Zul'Farrak reopens in Stranglethorn, the ancient Gurubashi capital you walked past at level 35. The troll priests have succeeded in summoning Hakar the Soul Flayer, a blood god of terrible power, and you and 19 other adventurers descend into the city to fight his high priests and face the blood god himself. This raid is also the source of the corrupted blood incident, a debuff from Hakar that spread uncontrollably through the game servers, killing players in cities, crashing economies, and creating an accidental pandemic simulation that was later studied by actual epidemiologists. So that's fun. Then comes the Gates of Ahn'Qiraj, which open in a massive server-wide war effort. In the desert of Silithus, an insectoid civilization known as the Qiraji stir beneath the sand, and they are servants of the old god Cthulhu. The ruins of Ahn'Qiraj lets you fight through the surface structures, but the temple of Ahn'Qiraj takes you deep underground to face Cthulhu itself, an old god, a being of incomprehensible evil that has been sleeping beneath the desert for eons. The Cthulhu encounter involves being literally swallowed by the creature and fighting from inside its stomach. And then, at the very end, the floating necropolis of Naxxramas appears over the Eastern Plaguelands. Kel'Thuzad, the Lich who founded Scholomance, and the Lich King's most powerful servant, and the architect of Lord'Aran's fall, has come to finish what the Scourge started. Naxxramas is divided into 4 wings: Arachnid, Plague, Military, and Construct, each controlled by a powerful group, and each require its own strategies and gear. And the difficulty is unlike anything that's come before. Then, at the end, past Sapphiron, an undead frost dragon, once a guardian of magic, now a frozen weapon, you face Kel'Thuzad himself. This is it. You started in the Valley of Trials. You had an old axe and what appeared to be a leather thong. You beat peons with a club. You killed boars. You picked cactus apples. And now you stand in a floating citadel of death, facing the right hand of the Lich King himself, with 39 other people who made the same insane journey you did. You came from nothing, a freshly spawned orc in a sun-baked litterbox, and you became this. So, remember the main guiding principle of Orcish society in this moment. If a problem exists, hit it until it no longer exists. Kel'Thuzad is a problem. Go hit him.